Hello, my name is Sarah, and this is how I heal. This movement session that I did here was focused on restoring my body. So I wanted to try to release tension that I was feeling in the shoulders and in the hips. So in starting this session off, I started nice and slow. I lied on my back, and then I wanted to see how far I could open my knee to the side without letting my back come up off the floor. And as I started doing that, I realized I couldn't go very far unless I rotated. Think about this position as the reverse, the inverted position of a hip car. And that's where you're on your hands and knees, trying to get the biggest range of motion with one hip at a time. So you take your leg into a circle, take your knee into a circle. So I was just trying to mimic those hip cars from an inverted position. Then I moved on to just getting my ankles warmed up, feeling that connection from the toes to the hip, moving through it nice and slow. Some gentle spinal twists here. If you practice yoga, you've probably done this in a yoga class. This is a really nice way to relax the low back, especially if you sit a lot. So one thing that I have learned, I moved to Ghana in June of 2022. And I needed a lot of space to heal. So I changed my lifestyle. I became sedentary most of the time. And it was probably for about 6 months. But in that 5th month, and then the beginning of the end of the 5th month, beginning of the 6th month, around that time, I started getting aches and pains in the body where I didn't need to have them. But however, I will say that these aches and pains that I got, they weren't brand new. I had seen tension in these areas in my body before, and I had been carrying it around. But because I wasn't doing as much, because I had lightened my load, I wasn't feeling the tension there until my body was like, okay, enough is enough. We need more movement throughout the day. So at this time, my movement sessions were really slow, extremely intuitive. I didn't really take any sort of plan with me looking for this movement here. Another move, if you're familiar with yoga, and if you're not, you can learn. This one is a happy baby, a great hip opener. You can pull on one side at a time to really get a deeper stretch in each hip, and then just alternate back and forth. You can even start to lengthen one leg and then the other as well, depending on how tight you are. And then I've got my cats in the background. Diamond the girl, that's her, the little tabby, and Orchid the boy playing in the bag. My little love bugs. They definitely helped the healing process as well. So here with that twist, releasing the back, one thing that I learned from having the sedentary lifestyle for so long is that I've never really been sedentary in my life before. And I now better understand the kind of aches and pains that can creep up from sitting still for so long. I also realized I'm not really a good sitter. Like, the seated posture, I need to work better at it. When I was in high school, I was in choir, and I took it very seriously. So my posture was spot on. And I always held myself in that posture anytime I was in front of anyone. And then I moved into the service industry, always standing up, always moving in front of people. And here I'm trying to just give the spine some movement in both directions, and also to activate the pelvic floor to work with my hips in this bridge. While I was in the service industry, I also went into music. I was in a band, so I was singing, dancing, performing for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a night, anywhere from 2 to 4 nights a week. And then I got into fitness. So I've been, pretty active and used to being on my feet for much of the day for most of my life, unless I was in school as a kid having to sit in class. I was active. I was out and about. I was going to find something to do. So this is really my first bout of sitting still for so long. Now here, I really was trying to focus on, is my leg working? How is my leg working from the bottom to the top? So I held the bridge at the top, trying to keep my core stable. And then I put some movement into the toes and just felt how that felt different moving up the leg. And then also trying to get that feeling into my feet as I'm going up on my toes. I've got my hammer toes, but they're getting better because of the attention I'm paying to my feet. So I'm also trying to bring my toes long and forward as I press up through my foot, so I can get some work into my foot and get some exercise to my foot, some blood flow into my feet as well. This reverse crunch, if you notice, my elbows are remaining on the floor, and I'm trying to gently press down into the elbows on the floor so I can make sure that my lats were engaged. And the lats are a big muscle group on the back of the body. They do a lot when you pull, but they do a lot for supporting the body as well. And here I want to raise my hips up off of the ground. So I'm going to tuck my knees to my chest and try to bring them as close to me as possible. And then as I'm bringing my legs back down, I want to make sure my hips come to the floor first, and then I'm going to gently set my feet on the floor. It doesn't look like much, but it really engages the core muscles in front, your abs, transverse abdominal muscles, the rectus abdominis, the middle going up the front, the low, deep abs in the front. And you can really feel that connection through the front of the body from the hips to the rib cage. Allowing myself to move really slow here and feel into that. Checking in again with the back of the body, seeing how supportive it can be during this movement. One thing that I am working on getting better at is checking in with my body. I have historically dissociated outside of my body anytime I needed to. I'm really good at it. I can do it really fast. And to the point where I didn't even realize the extent of it. So part of the healing that I'm doing spiritually is just reconnecting to my body. I have a really active brain and a lot of thoughts that go through. So if I have too much attention to my body, I can get uncomfortable. It can cause anxiety. I'll feel itchy. I feel any little thing that's touching me, and then I'm uncomfortable. So I've set my mind-body connection at 50%. That's what I'm telling myself each day, when I'm remembering that I need to be checked into my body, or if I'm noticing that I'm starting to leave my body, I have to try to remember I need to be in here 50%. Not 100%, because that's way too far for me. 50% is good for me. It's attainable and maintainable, sustainable, very able. I recorded several workouts And the way that I'm posting them, it's been a while since I've done some of them. So I did want to talk a little bit about my progress through that. Here, I'm coming out of a sedentary lifestyle after many months, half a year. And so I really did not want to jump into things and start moving too fast. I wanted to slow down and really check in with my form at a very deep level, like at the skeletal level. How are my muscles supporting the bones, and how is that translating into my posture? So I spent a lot of time in my movement sessions just sitting in a posture and breathing into a posture, holding a posture, and feeling what it felt like to hold it longer than the 1 or 2 seconds before I moved into an exercise. What does it feel like if I'm actually lying on the ground? I'm not just letting my body go limp onto the floor, but I'm lying on the floor. So what's happening as I'm doing that? How am I aligned to make it feel good? Very slow, deliberate movement while I did that as well. Being able to control where a limb was throughout the whole extension. Being able to control where a limb was the whole time it was flexing. Being able to hold a limb out and hold it steady. What does that stabilization do in my body? And again, today's focus for this movement session is restoring the body, releasing tension. And sometimes to release tension, you need to engage other areas. One thing that I like to tell my clients to try to help them as they start to move on their own and they start to come up with their own workouts and they start to do their own solo workouts, is that if you're feeling pain in the body, the opposite side of the body probably needs attention. So for an example, if you were to do a hip hinge, also known as an RDL, also known as a Romanian deadlift, when you're doing that hinge, you're in the standing position and you're kind of folding your body at the hips, you're reaching your butt backwards, a little bit of a bend in the knee, your arms are hanging low, coming in towards the legs. If you're feeling pain where the QL is, and that's a muscle on your low back to the side, and it's not like the low back where at the top of your butt, but the back and a little bit very low and a little bit to the side. If you're feeling pain in that area of the back, you probably need to engage your hip flexors, which are at the top of the leg in front of the body. And if you can learn how to engage specific muscles, you can then learn to manage imbalances within your body, and you can have less pain throughout movement. When I am trying to relieve tension in my hips and my shoulders, it is extremely important that I do core work, because from the hips to the shoulders, in between there, that is your core, front and the back. And if those muscles can't fire properly, or you cannot gain control over how those muscles fire, it can affect how your shoulders operate, and it can affect how your hips operate. So many times when I have a focus that's for hips and shoulders, I may not be doing an exercise that is precisely prescribed for hips and shoulders, but it's helping the overall function. Another thing here that I did while I'm lying on the ground, try to get my arms on the ground so that I can feel my shoulders flat on the ground and let them stay there as I'm moving and engaging through the core. Here I'm just gonna, now that I've been doing it in the front of the body, I'm gonna get some engagement into the obliques. They wrap around the body, they help you twist, they help you bend. They work together with the abs in the front and the muscles of the back behind you. They bring it all in for a beautiful twist. This is a little penguin crunch. I love it because it's cute. Here I am stretching. I'm not going into the yoga pigeon. I just went with what was comfortable, and having my leg folded and then putting the other one behind felt nice. I had plenty of room to move around so that I could adjust where the stretch was most intense as I was doing it. With how much I had been sitting and how stiff my hips were, I was really noticing the little things that my body does that are not quite in balance. And my hip on the right side rotating back and up. It was really hard for me to hold my hip into position. I could feel groups of muscles that were just not turning on. I was like, I didn't have access to them for an amount of time, and it's hard to describe, but it was just like they had turned off for a little bit, the muscles, and I was having to awaken them. And standing straight and bringing my hips in and underneath my rib cage was really hard to hold on the right side. This I started doing because I can connect the hips and the shoulders together. Down dog is great for total body connection because you get to be in an inverted position as well as a prone position. So now I'm moving into some glute work. And that block behind my knee there is only so that I can just feel that I'm able to hold the leg bend as I go up and come back down. It's not important for the exercise. I just used it as a guide. And once it was not guiding anymore, I just let it go. I like to keep my leg active as I go through these movements. It doesn't seem like it would make a big difference keeping the foot and the ankle engaged, but it does. It really does. Speaking of muscles turning off, if you are in a position where you have to support your body and you let some of the muscles at the bottom turn off, well, muscles above that are going to have to work harder because they don't have support. If you're in a plank and you let your legs just hang there limp, your shoulders are going to get really tired. But if you're in a plank and you engage your legs, that plank is going to be easier to hold because you have more muscles working. I gave a little attention to the feet and ankles, so I'm going to give a little attention to the wrists, hands, and fingers. And then do the exercise on the other side. Always on the other side. I'm trying to keep external rotation in my arms. And there it is. And that external rotation, what it does when you rotate the arms out like that, you make it to where it's not just the shoulder that you think of, like with the top of the shoulder there that comes out to the side that's working, but you're getting support from underneath the shoulder on the sides as well, underneath the armpit. You're finding support there as well, and the shoulders can handle more. The chest gets to be involved. When you have that external rotation there, you can have your pec minor at the top outside of the chest, you can have your pec minor supporting. Whereas if your arm is rotated in and your shoulder is sinking down, your pec minor is not going to be able to help you as much as if you had that external rotation. As I go from down dog to plank, I try to push myself forward into the plank with my legs and my hips. So I try to lower the hips. And here, this is allowing me to get some extension in the spine. Going from the down dog into the upward facing dog. Moving along here, just seeing how much range of motion I have from this posture. Sometimes for me, a lot of the work in restoring my body includes exploring my body. What does it feel like if I do this? What does it feel like on the other side? If I do it on one side, I always do it on the other side. Even if my goal is just to notice, not to make it exactly the same, but just to see how it's different. With this plank to down dog, again, keeping that external rotation, feeling how that changes for the shoulders. Bringing the elbows to the floor as I'm coming down and out of that. Using the elbows to kind of guide my shoulders into that healthy posture where I don't end up with tension in one side of the shoulder. Second set for these glute kickbacks. No guide, just feeling for the posture, really trying to keep my body stable. And as it sinks out of that stable position, trying to readjust to get back into it, as close to back into it as I can. My wrists were really feeling it, especially just getting started back. Currently, they're not so bad. Also, too, the goal for this movement session was restorative. So making sure not to leave anything with more tension than I started with. My goal here was for as little movement as possible in the body, just wanting the leg to be what's moving. Trying to keep the shoulders flat on the back as I rotate the arms out to engage the outside of the upper core. Reaching that leg back, pulling the toes in towards my shin so that leg is active. So I touched on it earlier, but if I have that leg active behind me, it's not going to hang down. If I've got as much of that leg holding my leg up behind me as possible, my low abs don't have to work to pull that leg away from the ground as hard because my leg is holding itself up. these movements here too while I'm working on alignment for myself. I like to do them a lot, many times, high volume. So I spend a lot of time on it. I will say this, some of these sessions, my shoulder, while releasing tension and being able to move the shoulder more, I got more blood flow and I could feel the pain coming through. You know, I had muscles that were getting woken up, and those muscles were hollering at me the next day. It was after this day, because we've got the modified dolphins here. This is an excellent move to work on shoulder stability, durability, however you want to look at it. You've got your shoulders going at many different angles here, and then the ground is keeping you stable, so your arms can't rotate too far. So once you get your shoulders into place, you just press yourself back into like that down dog. This is like a modified dolphin, if you're familiar with yoga. I myself am not a certified yoga teacher, just a person that practices personally. So I like to incorporate yoga with strength movement. Trying to come all the way down to the floor. Trying to bring myself back as one piece, and then hinging at the hips. This movement was very slow. Tried to keep it as controlled as possible. And then just always adjusting as I'm moving through everything as well. That's a lesson that I took from yoga classes. Don't worry about how still the posture is. Do what your body has to do to stay in the posture. Notice the adjustments. See if you can change the intensity that they come through. But it's really helpful, especially if you sit still for long amounts of time, or if you're standing in one position for long amounts of time. I have to remind myself, seated is a posture. Standing is a posture. Lying on the floor, on the ground, especially if you're at a class or something, is a posture. I shouldn't just be placing my body down into those positions. I should be holding my body in a certain way. And if you think about how hard it is to hold something for a really long time, hold a position for a long time, it should make sense that we need to make little movements throughout the day. Just try to pick up anything you can find and hold it out in front of you with a straight arm for more than 5 minutes. That's kind of what we're doing to our body when we're expecting it to be able to sit up really tall for hours on end without ever even checking back in on it to be like, hey, you good? When you think of it that way, it really makes sense. Like, no wonder I move so much when I stand and when I sit. I thought it was because I'm ADHD, but, it could be my body's intuition of being like, don't make me hold this posture for 20 minutes with no break in between. That's my muscles asking for a little difference in their shape for a minute. Same thing when I'm standing. I'm always putting my weight kind of a little bit back and forth. I don't stand still. I'm swaying a little bit. Most of the time it's because my hips aren't even anyway, so I can keep them more even if I move back and forth between the two of them. These are some wipers. Hitting up the oblique muscles again. With this posture, I wanted to keep my torso on the ground. I wanted to keep my shoulders on the ground. So that's why I'm not aiming towards the floor. I'm not trying to make this the hardest posture possible. I'm just trying to make this the most supported posture possible, which in turn makes it that much harder. Many people look at the range of motion and they're like, but I could do more. Yeah, but why don't you sit inside the shorter range of motion with slower movement and see what happens? You may find it's harder than doing it with a big range of motion. Here, I'm going to do a little bit of work for the triceps. Now, this is not weighted. I don't consider a yoga block to be weighted. So for me, this is a body weight exercise. So I went for volume. I did a lot. I didn't stop. I didn't take a break. I just kept that part moving. And I also moved really, really slow, because the longer you hold the posture, the more deeply you feel it in the muscles. The muscles having to work in that isometric, static hold. I'm going to get the glutes involved here, try to keep my alignment through the total body as I move the arms. Not worrying about lifting and arching the back, more so worried about lifting and keeping the hips feeling extended. And that extension of the hips is felt in the front of the body. That's where your hip flexors are. And when the hip flexors contract, the hips will flex or bend or hinge. So when you're doing a hip hinge, you do want to feel some work in your hip flexors. That way your QL doesn't overwork. You don't feel that pain in the back where you don't want it. You don't feel that work in the back where you don't want it. Maybe it's not even pain. Maybe it's just extra work, but it's not painful. Opposite of flexing is extending. So the hip flexors, I like to call them the abs of the hips. You can turn them on to really help hold the hips in their extended position as well. Just because it's a flexor muscle does not mean that it does not have to be involved in the extension of that joint. Keeping the blood flow going to the arms, giving my mid and lower body a little break, but not breaking on the arms. I used the yoga block here to keep me in the same posture throughout the movement. It stabilizes where my hands are. They're not going to move wider and they can't move closer together. So that's also going to help my elbows stay in the same position that they are in relation to my wrist and in relation to my shoulder. I really like to use tools when I'm trying to correct or when I'm trying to restore. I like to use tools to guide my body. That way I can do the work with a gentle focus. It lessens the amount of focus that I have to use. Here, just trying to hold on to that stability for the hips. The tendency for the hips is to sink back down to the ground. So the glutes are working, pushing up and away from the ground. The glutes are the muscles of the butt. And they're pushing the hips up. So what I want to do to support that is turn on the inner thighs and the pelvic floor muscles. One thing that I noticed while I was doing the glute bridges was that my hip flexor was not firing as effectively as it could. So one of the next things I did was an exercise to turn it on. Moving this slow really engages that muscle at a deep level. What I'm trying to do here is keep my torso really tall so that I'm not rounding the spine and then pulling in from a different part of the body. And I was really trying to focus on lifting from the top of the leg. Not worrying, I'm keeping my leg straight, but I want to be lifting from the top of my leg. It is amazing the difference between focusing on a muscle and asking it to engage and just throwing your body into a posture. Amazing the difference. As a historical dissociator, to where I could live probably days outside of my body, it's really cool to be able to know my body this well. It's really empowering to be able to know my body this well. I ignored so many signals that my body sent me throughout my life. So being able to trust what is being sent to me and not turning to outside sources and letting them tell me what I'm feeling or tell me what I should be experiencing or tell me how I should react to something. You know, being able to feel what I'm feeling inside the body and to trust that, it's everything. It's everything. Also, knowing my body this well, I know what I'm capable of. I know how far I can go. I know how much further I can go when I don't want to go any further. The mental, physical connection, so important. I have to be able to put them together. And fitness has given me space to learn my body, but wellness is really what helps me take care of my body, making sure that I'm aiming for the healthiest options possible. Taking it in for some cat-cow with some added movement. I often, when I get into this quadruped position, I like to make circles in the thoracic area of my spine. And this is because I can stretch not just along the spine, down the spine, but along the sides too, and get into the rib cage along with that. So now we're putting the hip and the shoulder stability together. Single leg work here. One side of my body is stabilizing, one side is working. So I'm really trying to keep the upper body turned on. Try not to let those shoulders droop down too much. Keep pressing the ground away from the floor. Bringing my leg long out to the side. This is really hard to get the leg to come long out to the side, so sometimes bending the knee is helpful, and just never putting your foot on the floor. Holding on to the external rotation of the arms, resetting. With these movement sessions coming back and trying to get into a regular pattern, one of the most important things that I had to do was try to have judgment-free self-talk. And I set myself with a goal of doing it 2 times a week to start. Twice a week. Can I get in some intentional movement? Yes, I can. Can I do it 3 times a week? Okay. Can I do it 4 times a week? Okay. Can I do it 5 times a week? No. Right now my body's like 4 is enough. So that's where I am. I'm at 4 currently. But at this point, I'm probably at that 2 or 3. rotating the hip so I can bring the leg around and keep it long. Getting all the sweat off my face so it doesn't distract me. Trying not to let my body twist, but let the rotation happen in the hip joint. It's a ball and socket joint, so it has a really big range of motion. A lot of direction can happen in the hips, especially when you're dealing with single leg. During this time, this intro period of getting back to it, the amount of readjusting that I had to do just to get myself into a lot of these positions, it's like, no, I can't quite find the stability that I want for the total body. I could hold the posture, but what I was looking for was for all of my body from head to toe to be connected in the work, for all of my body to be taking part in it. I'm going in for a second set with the hip flexor. The second set is usually better than the first, especially if your starting baseline is at a beginner spot. If you're in the beginning of something, where I consider myself to be during this workout, I'm at my beginner level, my off-season status. And for rep count, sometimes I don't count, to be honest. Especially when I'm doing slow correctional work like this. One side might be weaker than the other side. So if I just go by feeling in the muscle, if I want the left muscle to feel as tired as the right muscle did after it's set, I do the reps until I get to that work. And when I find the weaker side, I try to push myself an extra rep or two past where that side wants to give out to really try to gain strength. On the stronger side, I just go until I start to feel the work accumulate. Now with work where I'm doing a superset and I'm putting two exercises together. I'm kind of doing a superset here in this restorative, but if I'm putting two heavier exercises together, I like to count reps whenever I'm doing that. And I've been using my rep count at 20 right now. That's what I'm doing for my current workouts. Granted, they're very lightweight. You can't see what equipment I have available to me, but it is minimal and it does not weigh much. I only have one set of weights. They're 5 pounds. And then everything else is resistance bands or small little blocks or balls or something like that. So whenever I go for higher volume, I can feel the work from the exercises a little more than if I only did 8 or 10 reps. And I want the effects of these movements that I'm doing to last. I want them to remind me for the rest of the day and maybe a little bit for tomorrow of the posture that I'm aiming for. Yeah, keeping the back raised, pulling the chest up and away from the floor, pushing the chest up and away from the floor through the arms, lifting the belly up and away from the ground. Also, not worrying about how far off the ground my foot is. Really just lengthening my legs. I'm pretty sure I had my eyes closed. Most of the time, whenever I do movements like this, where I don't have to worry about stepping on something or tripping over something. I've got my eyes closed when I'm working. Even if it's squats or something, I've gotten to a point where I prefer to have my eyes closed, at least for the first couple of sets, and then maybe the last set, that's when I'll open them up and see what I'm doing. The work I'm doing in the body now, I'm really trying to go by feel instead of by sight. But that is a deeper part of the healing process than just the movement itself. I'm trying to change a coping mechanism habit. And a lot of times, when you're doing this physical work, it coincides with whatever's going on emotionally. Sometimes we don't even know it, but certain areas of the body can give us clues as to what we're feeling emotionally. Neck, shoulders, something current is happening. You know, if it's in the hips, it's something old. I'm rushing through this side. Notice there, I'm not even moving the leg as slow. So this side was tired. That was probably my weak side. I'm going to practice some hip hinges here. I really want to set my spine. I have a tendency to let my rib cage pop out at the sternum. And that's not beneficial to a hinge. So I'm trying to work on that, keeping the back in alignment. So I bring my hands to the body in front so I can feel when and where the body is moving. Even if I don't try to stop it from moving, just so I can know and feel what's happening. Now this is the hinge that I was speaking of earlier when you're talking about the QL. If you look at my hand that's lower, if I were to pull that hand to the side of my body and then flip it over to the other side, the QL is probably going to be around there in the back. So right here is in the hinge, at the bottom of the hinge, is often where people feel extra work in that area of the back. So from right here, if you pull up with the low belly and pull up and in with the low belly, oftentimes you can get your hip flexors to fire. And the hip flexors are going to be in the crease of the hip, where the hip flexes. I want to bring the movement going into the hinge from the hips. So I try to move my hips first, reach back and up with the butt. Reach forward with the shoulders, top of the shoulders, reach them forward as I come down. That way my spine stays long, my core stays engaged. And now, taking it in for some squats. I love this position for my hands because it really keeps the abs turned on. But I don't think I was comfortable going into it that day. I think I wanted to try to keep everything turned on myself. Yeah. I'm like, can I do it without the little trick? And at the bottom of this squat, I want to feel that my weight is even in my feet from the front to the back. So I'm not moving forward or backward on my feet. And I've got that small ball in between my legs because not only do I want to feel the outer muscles working, but I want to feel the inner muscles working as well. Squeezing in with the legs will turn on the inner thighs. Here at the bottom, coming back up, the legs are externally rotated, and so those muscles have to work to hold the leg in that position, in that externally rotated position. So you can also feel some work on the outside of the legs too. inside and the outside. Trying to have that same focus as I did for the hip hinge. Keep the back in alignment. Don't let the hips have that anterior pelvic tilt. Big arch in the low back. Taking less of a pause at the bottom here and really just trying to move down and then slowly move back up. Even work going down and going up. That was my goal. Now I'm going to bring a block into the hip hinge. And earlier I spoke on having stability in that modified dolphin for the arms. Well, this block is going to give me stability through the shoulders because I can't move my arms. So my shoulders will stay in a similar place the whole time. So now I can really work on lengthening my back, having my shoulders stay flat along the back as I bring the hips behind my heels. This is where my hips just felt sticky, especially on the right side. So when I'm stopping to adjust and moving my hips and moving my knees and feet, it's because I feel like my hip is so close to being in the right place, but just like millimeters off. And it's like that close that I feel like I have to be able to get it. I have to adjust it. It doesn't always work though. My focus at the time was to come into that straight posture and just rotate the heck out of my hip and hold it in that position as strongly as I could and hope that it would stay. And it did. I mean, it did work, but I had to keep doing it over and over again a lot of times. So now my focus is, okay, can I just mentally send that signal there and not even necessarily know that it's doing it all the way, but just feel that it's firing to where it's supporting, not allowing my hip to go back and rotate as far as it was before. Can I do that subtly? I still have to focus on it, but can I do it subtly? And if I can, that makes it to where I can start making that adjustment of rotating my hip up and forward. I can start making that adjustment while I'm walking, because I can't make these adjustments while I'm moving. I have to be standing like that to, kind of shift everything from side to side and even it out that way. With this work too, I also have my toes rotated outward slightly because it's really hard for me to hold on to external rotation. So if I just turn my toes out from where they were straight, I turn them out like 2 inches on each side, very small amount, then the work that happens in my hip, I feel it all the way around the hip. It's super fast. So hinging, you can turn the toes out slightly. Squatting, same thing here. My focus on the squat is to try to feel the center of my weight and keep that centered in between my feet so that the center of my weight is going directly up and down, not forward and drawing like a little curved line, but dropping and shooting straight back up to where I was before. And for me, at this point, all of that focus was on the hips. I couldn't focus on anything else. All I could focus on was bringing my hips to extended. Don't let my hips tilt backwards. That was it. And that was a hard focus. Thank goodness for music. My jams to work out to, I love Spotify playlists. The Butter playlist, awesome. Floating, that's another good one on Spotify. But yeah. This especially feels nice after just opening the hips up. You know, being able to take them from side to side. It's a good thing. I am trying to repeat the squat from before where I had the ball in between my legs. I'm trying to engage those same muscles on the inner thighs without having my legs touch, which is doable. It takes time and focus. My weight was pretty evenly distributed for these. There wasn't a lot of shift forward and backward as I went through the squats. One of the reasons I leave things like this in on the videos of the workouts that I do is because it's part of the work. You know, I need to be able to move my body for me in creative ways, you know, for me in more fluid ways. It feels better. This lovely exercise right here, I learned from Dr. Jacob on Instagram. He's also on YouTube. But this exercise, when I did it, I felt all of the muscles that I had been trying to wake up. As I said, I had felt like a lot of my muscle groups were just turning off. They were being really lazy. This exercise targeted exactly those muscles where I was like, it's like they're just trying, but they can't make it happen. This was really helpful for that. My left hip is actually not my weaker hip. Everything else on the right side is stronger pretty much. But the hip, it's hard. I couldn't even hardly point my knee up towards the ceiling. I guess I couldn't point it up towards the ceiling at all. And watching the foot, how it moves, I can see where my leg is sticking. I can feel it where it was sticking. I did this movement probably 4 times a week. So even on days when I wasn't doing a movement session, I might still do these. And I did it for 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. My concept of time is not the best, but it really helped. It really helped. I needed, a solid month where this was how my workouts were. Slow paced, intensely focused. And then things started to unlock, and I got to a point where I was like, I want to do more than this. I want to do more. I was feeling it. My body was calling for it. And that's when I started stepping it up. But not until my body was craving it. That was another part of the process during this phase coming out of a sedentary lifestyle, was self-talk, reframing the way I spoke to myself, making sure that I wasn't shaming myself. I listened to a podcast with Brene Brown as a guest, and she was explaining the difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is where you're like, oh, I feel so bad. I could have hurt someone, or I could have had a bad effect on something. I wish I didn't do that. That's guilt. Shame is oh my God, why would I do this? What is wrong with me? Why can I not figure this out? Like, no one else would ever do this. When you're wondering what's wrong with you, that's shame. And she was saying that guilt is healthy because it keeps you empathetic. It's attached to empathy and compassion. Shame causes a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. So my biggest focus when getting things started was don't shame myself. Don't shame myself. Don't shame myself. And so I was trying to reframe my thoughts sometimes before they even occurred. Before it ever happened. Taking more movement for the spine and hips. Connecting it all together from hips to shoulders. Seeing how it feels to have my arm extended and above the head. Feeling that out down the side of the body. Getting into things slowly, not trying to take anything too far from the start. That was the other thing I think that kept me going in this, is that I didn't push myself. I knew I needed to work, so I might make myself start a workout, but in the workout itself, I did not push myself. If there was something that I didn't feel like doing, I didn't do it. Also, I didn't prescribe any movement for these workouts. These were intuitive movement sessions where it was like, okay, where do I want to start? I want to start with my hips. And then as I was in that movement, the next movement just came to my mind, and that's what I went to. But not having the pressure of being told to do a specific movement and dreading every second of it was helpful for me. I could have written out workouts for myself and said, no, you're doing all of it. But I wanted to be gentle, and I'm glad that I did, because I naturally got to where I wanted to be. I made it. Cat-cow. This is one of my favorite movements. Talking about mobility for the spine here. Oftentimes what I do when I'm doing cat-cow, I take the first couple naturally, and then what I really want to do is place myself in the hands and knees position where my shoulders are not moving forward and backward, and my butt is not moving forward and backward. I'm moving my spine to get into that position. And then whenever I'm at the top or the bottom, then I can pull my shoulder blade here, pull my shoulder blades down my back. And here in the cat, I'm wanting to push my hips forward. Getting out those kinks. Side stretch here. I love getting in a stretch where it's comfortable and then making small movements in it. And again, if you do it on one side, do it on the other. Just trying to get my shoulder blades to move freely, not feel so stuck. Stuck or hanging, one of the two. My right shoulder was starting to droop from all of the sedentariness of my life. Down and forward. I have never been able to do this comfortably, where I could put my forearms down on the ground like that. I would always have pain in the back. But I was able to make it here. Even though my lifestyle had been sedentary, I was still focused on posture and alignment. So when I was active, like going to cook or walking to the store, or, like whenever I was doing whatever it was I was actually going to do for the day, I tried to be mindful still, even though I wasn't working out, of using certain muscle groups. And what I learned is I need movement for my body to stay healthy. But it's a visceral lesson. It's in there. Really just testing the boundaries of how far I can move through certain postures and positions and forms without any pain. Because you never know until you do. Another thing about cat-cow that I love so much, because I have the tendency to let my sternum stick out, I get some arching of the mid-back, but it's really small. It's not as noticeable. It's not as significant as what would happen in the low back. So a lot of times it looks like my posture is fine, but really I should be pulling that sternum in. And because of that mini extension of the back, that flexion in cat where you get to round the spine feels really good. Really good, especially around the shoulder blades for me. This movement here, I saw it in a magazine and I was like, I wonder how effective that is. So I'm targeting my obliques here. And again, the ball is just to help keep my lower body still. I don't want my hips to twist. I want my trunk to twist. And this is, it's a really good way to explore your obliques if you're not familiar with them, if you're not able to engage them easily without having to think about it, because your lower body is so stable and you have something to hold on to. Things that you could put in between your knees. You could put a yoga block there. You could put a book. You could put a pillow. Honestly, just something that you can put some pressure with so that you don't let everything come off the ground when you twist. Each side is different than the other. For me, I've gotten to a point where I kind of expect differences in certain areas. I kind of know where to look for imbalances or just where things are not similar. That took a lot of time, understanding the way that my hip affected me. I knew that my hip rotated back and up. And I've been to several chiropractors. Each one always promises exercises. I never got prescribed specific exercises, to help a lot of these problems. And with something like my hip rotating back and up, when that pain occurs, I can't get comfortable. So really just knowing my body well, so then I can start to understand what's being affected. Like, this imbalance is here, yeah, but how is it affecting me? And then when I see how it's affecting me, how can I change this? That's what I'm looking for when I'm moving around on the floor. I'm looking to feel the connection of where the tension is, where the work is, if there's pain, where the pain is. And I want to feel into that connection to where I can release tension, release pain. This side was a struggle bus. Or maybe I just couldn't tell because you couldn't see from that angle. But it really looks like I'm just full on twisting off the ground. It's like that leg cannot hold down. I do take it into a different exercise though for the obliques. This one is a surefire way for me. I have the stability ball, so sitting tall is work. I'm trying to lengthen my spine from the hips to the rib cage and lengthen my spine from the rib cage to the neck. Holding on to that ball in between the knees keeps me from turning my hip when I turn. After I get over to the side, I'm holding because I want to feel those muscles working. And they're going to be working as I release myself back to center as well. I like bringing my arms out in front of me like this. It's easier to focus. It's easier to keep my abs engaged. When you bring the arms down, the shoulders will hang, the abs will turn off. If you hold your arms up and out, your core will stay on. And that's for so many things, so many movements. Hold your arms, reach them out. If it's up that you need, reach them up. All the way through the fingers, active fingers. If it's out to the side that you need, make a fist and bring your arms all the way out to the side. If it's in front of you, spread your fingers. Point them forward. Again, total body connection for stability. Learning the differences between the two sides of the body, of my body. Trying to sit up tall and remember to twist all at the same time. When you slow down your workouts, the focus has to come. And that focus will deepen your relationship with your body. That is what I'm doing here in this restorative flow. Trying to deepen the focus that I have on my body. Allow myself to be more and more comfortable inside my body. If I feel comfortable inside my body, I am comfortable anywhere. Anywhere. If I'm comfortable anywhere, you better look out, world. Unstoppable. Thanks for joining me. I hope you received some good info from today. Be well.